Good day, everybody. Welcome to South Africa virtually. And today we're speaking about honoring the no. I am from the South African Association for Marine Biological Research, which incorporates Ushaka SeaWorld. A lovely place to be. You should all come and visit. Today I would like to speak about, but before I do, I just want to present a disclaimer suggesting that this is mainly my point of view and a lot of theory that I have put into my point of view. So my feeling is that with using positive reinforcement, we have great power over animals or people, whoever we're using it with. And with great power, as Spider-Man said, comes great responsibility. So that's what we're going to be looking at. We need to ensure that positive reinforcement remains a superpower for us because it does affect the emotional well-being of the animals in our care. Animals, remember, are sentient beings, and when we work with them, potentially we're affecting their very well-being. For example, associations may occur during their training. We're not always very good as trainers, and this can result in the animal failing more than it succeeds. There may be external things going on as well that affect how positive reinforcement works. So it's important that we always try to remain cognizant of where the animal is in relationship with us. Are we, as well, in partnership with them, or are we trying to dominate them? Human beings generally take it very personally when they're not being heard or acknowledged or obeyed. We have a fundamental fear of not being excluded, and that's for good reason, because as evolution would have it, if we aren't part of a community, then our safety is actually not secure. People may argue that they like being on their own, they don't like people, but that's because we're afraid of that judgment. So fundamentally, even more fundamental than choosing to be our own is choosing to be accepted or wanting to be accepted. And this is easy to rub off on animals. Like animals are very often, particularly in training sessions, we are used to succeeding. And if we don't, we might look silly. And that can not bear well for our relationship with the animal. Because our egos come into play. And when the animals don't listen to us, our egos cloud our awareness and we lose sight of the animal that's before us. And that doesn't work for anybody. There's some really cool models that are being used in the ethology world right now. This one is from James A. Russell, and it's the arousal model, which you can see has got all sorts of emotions on it. And it suggests that animals and people are quite complex. It's not easy to put everything into a model. But if you look at this model just for simplicity's sake, the arousal continuum is through the middle. So going from the bottom to the top. And then we move from left to right, where on the right-hand side, we have more pleasing emotions happening. On the left-hand side, more negative emotions. If you look at these from a human point of view, you'll notice that all these emotions probably happen when we're not feeling as though we have control. Whereas on this side, we usually have some control, and so we don't have anything to panic about. Remembering again that having a sense of control is actually fundamental and to our feeling safe. When we look at that model, once again, and we have a line maybe that's the same as the fight or flight or freeze line, above that line, we have no control over our reactions, or we're simply reacting from a place of total looking after our safety. Whereas in the bottom right, we're chilling and we're happy, and we can make decisions because we're not so anxious. So the trick is to always keep thinking so that we are staying responsive as opposed to being reactive. And again, the trick is to keep our animals thinking as well. Because what we interpret as their behavior may not always be true. It's only very recently come to pass that dogs wagging of tails is not always seen as a happy indicator. It can mean all sorts of things. Dogs have extremely expressive tails. So what does it mean when a dolphin jumps really high? Is it from a place of anxiety or a place of enthusiasm? And it could be both. At the end of the day, we need to focus on whether the animal is in control of its destiny, or if we are completely in control of their destiny. And from an ethical point of view, and to ensure their welfare, we need to make sure that we're working more to make sure that they have control, just like all the enrichment specialists have spoken about for years. Primary reinforcement, in the ABMA glossary, similarly in the Amata one, a stimulus that is innately reinforcing due to a species history. What's even more fundamental than food, however, is a sense of being in control and safety. I'm sure we've all dealt with animals at some point that have not eaten or want to eat because they're feeling anxious. So how can we add choice to ensure ethical desensitization to the animals in our training sessions? The buzzword choice has caused quite a lot of debate, which is really exciting. And I think that's mainly because people feel that free choice, but that choice means free choice. And I think free choice is a stressful thing. It's actually been proven in the science that free choice is not valuable. And when we're provided with too many choices, it's difficult for us and it can be stressful. Same for the animals. Everybody needs clear choices that can be reinforcing with outcomes. And for this reason, we're a big fan of using default behaviors, which we're going to describe. So the first very easy default to understand is one, I will just use the example straight off to explain how it works, is we provide the animals something to do that is always reinforcing. So in this case, it was the dolphin Frodo, who at this point in her training had become fairly disengaged for a number of reasons. She was drifting off. And so what we tried to do was provide her an opportunity to always be reinforced and in control. So at any point, if she touched that yellow float, she would get a reinforcer. This soon actually generalized into her telling us that she didn't want to do certain things. And that was information in itself, which we'll speak of a little later. She would always receive positive reinforcement for touching that yellow buoy. And this worked very well. She was soon engaging a lot more receptively with all the trainers. Then my friend Franta, this is one that would definitely be in his ballpark, Franta Suster from the Czech Republic. But I would like to describe it in a lesson that I learned from my dog Sage. I was trying to teach her to work with me so that I could get stitches out of her after she had an operation. So she had a default, which was a mat, which she could go and sit on at any point in time, which would tell me to stop. And then I would call her off it, and we would work on touching her around where the stitches were. And she kept defaulting back to the mat. Obviously, it was tender, and I obviously was a very insensitive trainer and wasn't listening. And at one point, she stayed engaged, but walked all the way back to a table, which was further away from me, was looking at me and going, so now what you going to do? So I remembered Franta and his far default, which he said, just give them a few moments because they're obviously choosing to be away from you because you're too much for them at this point in time. And then reinforced that, and soon we were back on track, and I was more sensitive and she was more successful. So at that point, she was actually seeking negative reinforcement from me. Then the informal default, I think, is one that is probably requires the most to talk about. And that is the fact that animals are making choices all the time in our sessions. So a slight moment of hesitation, or an animal habitually going off to scratch, or socially engaging rather than being with us. If we pay attention, we'll start to notice that there are actually patterns in that. And very often animals are doing that for the reason that they are not wanting to do what we're asking them to do. We have, for example, seals would often swim into the water, and now we notice that and pay attention to why it's happening. Again, it's like Sage going under the table. So it's really important if they're choosing to move away from us at any time. Okay, so the function of all these no's provides us information. That's all it does. You know, we take it personally when we get things wrong. And what we should actually be doing, if we were being truly logical and ethical, is actually go, okay, so when did they move off? Or when did they go and scratch? And I want to give you some examples of how we've actually been able to use information that's been provided to us because of these no's. As I said, Frodo, one of the behaviors that she told us she did not want to do was jump out to be weighed, and we noted afterwards that there was physical discomfort in this. We had another dolphin who's been taught to default, and hers is to also touch those yellow floats, which are often used left in the water. And she loves doing creative training sessions, but on one day she was feeling, I think, a little hormonal, and when I asked her to do a creative session, she went and pulled the yellow float back and said, no, thank you, not today. Social discourse, when there's stuff going on between animals, especially if we're working them in groups, we've noted this before when we've asked them to do something and then they choose the default instead. When they're confused, particularly in training session, we're teaching them something new and they will touch the defaults. And then we note that we need to make the step more reinforcing or smaller. Maybe we've taken too big a step in the training. Poor conditioning, I think that goes without saying. Not possible is probably my favorite one. This was again Frodo, when a new trainer asked her to do a tail wave, which requires her to put her head down in the water column and wave her tail out of the water. And the trainer asked her to do this in a shallow pool, which was impossible. So she said, no, I can't do that. My recent most favorite thing is the SEAL trainers working with a SEAL who is being in therapy because of some concern on his back, which requires massage and heat and cold therapy. And we were concerned that because he is so well trained with his blood and injection, that he would not actually give us the information that we needed. Particularly the therapist wanted to know when it hurt. So we asked him to tell us, and that was by asking him to touch that that orange buoy every single time he wanted us to stop. And he was often rewarded in the position during the massage or the heat or the cold therapy. So it was always reinforcing to be there. And if he said, no, that's enough, then hands off and we would stop and either go back a step or potentially end the session. Yeah, so looking at things from going back a step or doing what needs doing, but essentially from the animal's point of view is looking after their welfare. And that is why we are here. We're here to have good, meaningful conversations with animals. And this is another tool in our toolbox that is really starting to open our eyes to the fact that these sentient beings are here. And what's really curious, I told you about the dolphin that went off to go and fetch the yellow buoys. If you start a session with her, she'll go and fetch that yellow buoy just so she can have that conversation with you rather than you tell her what to do. So nothing new, it's all stuff that's been shared before, but from an animal welfare point of view, I think it's really exciting. And I look forward to communicating with any of you who would like to learn more about this or tell me what you've been doing on this as well. Thank you very much for the opportunity to chat to all of you. It's been an absolute honor, and I thank the ABMA, and hopefully we can all get together next year. Thank you.